All right. And so today's workshop, Mort is my co-presenter. And so we're going to be talking about engagement strategies for online discussions in Brightspace. As always, I ask if you do tweet to join the conversation about educational technology. Use the hashtag EdTech, also FactDev, and then tag @Zulacat. The workshop slides and resources that we're going to be discussing today can be found on our wiki, and you can either go to the URL catwiki.zula.edu/discussion, or you can scan this QR code. And so if my voice of the chat will drop that link into the chat for me.
Yep, I am.
All right. Okay, and we've seen this before, the 3 R's. So memorizing may be handy in some situations, but having a deeper understanding of the subject is where you're going to truly learn. And this is where we want the students to be. So this topic today is the 11th in our series of LEX Advanced topics, where we're going to focus on online discussions and see how we can have some engagement strategies for the learners. Our LEX course, the Learn Everywhere Zula course, was designed around the Quality Matters standards. And for today's topic, standard number 5.2, learning activities promote opportunities for interaction that support active learning, is the standard, one of the standards that's applicable here today. Also, standard 6.2, course tools promote learner engagement and active learning. Additionally, if you look at the 7 principles of good pedagogical practice by Chickering and Gamson, principle number 2 says develops reciprocity and cooperation among students. And further, it says good learning is going to be collaborative and social. It's not competitive and isolated. So working with others often increases involvement in learning. Principle number 3 says encourages active learning. And with this one, learning is not a spectator sport. The students must talk about what they're learning, write about it, relate it to past experiences, and apply it to their daily lives. So we'll look at how these standards and principles, we can use these in terms of our strategies for online discussions. If you did your homework, we asked you to consider what issues or challenges you might have in using online discussions. And so that's where we'd like to start. So what issues or challenges, as you consider this topic, do you think you might have? If you're in the chat, you can either type it in the chat, or you can, if you're virtual, you can either type it in the chat, or you can unmute yourself. If you're in the room, we should be able to hear you.
Just getting the students to do it.
Just getting the students to do it. Yes.
The logistics of that, like when they post and how they respond to each other, I would find it a little overwhelming. Who does the first one? And then when do they respond? And setting it up in a way that it doesn't feel onerous time so they don't do it.
Yeah, one of the research, one of the articles I read last week said if it's not assessed, students won't do it. So I make it, I make it a part of my grading, and because they're going to be graded, they'll do it. If they're not, I've tried them in the past where I've had students, I said, these are voluntary discussion boards and nobody used them.
And in the chat, we're getting some grading, time, student reluctance for their post to be seen by other people, especially introverts, keeping students engaged.
Yeah, I think a big part of it for me is on the instructor's side of it is just the engagement, the amount of time it takes, because I find that if I engage with, the first few students that contribute, if I do that regularly, then I'm more likely to get all of the other students joining in as well. So it takes a lot of time on the instructor's part to keep the discussion boards active and engaging for everybody.
And
Hello, can I add? Hello?
Yes, I can hear you, Abba, but I'm not sure if they can hear you in the room.
Okay.
Okay,
can
go
do.
ahead. Go
So
ahead.
I would agree that it takes a lot for the instructor to keep the ball rolling. But, depending on the topics that we have for discussion, if they are interested, for example, I have an introduction discussion, for all my courses now. And I forget to check them and they get crowded so much because students are so interested in their introductions and knowing each other, I guess, just before the course has started, that it actually, it's flooding my Brightspace course page. I think depending on the topic that they want to discuss, it could be a little tricky. And grading, I'm not worried about the grading, but this, I state in the introduction part that this is non-graded, but they still do it. And the things that are graded, I usually keep them extra points. They are not part of the course points, they are extra points.
Yeah.
But, once you get a hang of grading, it's like one after the other. Grading can come there also. But for me, it is the graded discussions that is something that I have to remind them again and again to keep filling. So that was what I wanted to say.
thank you.
All right. Thanks for sharing that. All right. Any other comments?
Ashley mentioned that instead of grading, perhaps providing participation points is another way to engage them.
Great. All right. And so, yes, everything you said is an issue or a challenge, and there are possibly others. And so with this workshop today, we want to make sure that we give you some information about that, help and resources, and directions to go. And then those of you who have done discussions in your courses, share how you've approached that. But so just to recap some of the things that we talked about for issues and challenges related to student behaviors. Students going off track from the topic, maybe they're doing drive-by postings, students who don't contribute to the discussion, plagiarizing other students' postings, personal attacks and bullying, and then when you have conflicts in the discussion. Issues and challenges, and we've talked about most of these, for the instructor, keeping up with discussion goals and balancing the student response times, making sure students aren't just posting to meet the requirements, but they're engaged in the discussion. You want to make sure that you're demonstrating you're paying attention without becoming overwhelmed reading all of those posts. Students need to take ownership over leading the discussions. They may have asynchronous discussion fatigue, grading those discussions, making discussions a space where students can synthesize those course materials, and time involved in answering questions and responding to discussion posts. So as I said, we'll address issues and challenges and provide you with some resources, information and resources where you can go for additional information. But what makes a quality online discussion? When you have a quality online discussion, it's going to start with your discussion prompt. You need to have a discussion prompt that's going to encourage student engagement. You also have to have instructions and set expectations that are clear and specific for the students. Your grading criteria has to be specific and descriptive as well, and then you need to be strategic about the feedback that you provide to your students. A great discussion questions, they're clear and easy to understand. They are going to foster a dialogue with the students. They're inclusive, and they're going to align with your course objectives. So you'll craft your questions that are going to give learners the opportunity to form opinions and build on each other's insights. And here with Bloom's taxonomy of knowledge, this illustrates the different levels of learning and understanding, right? The bottom of the pyramid represents the most basic levels of learning, where your thinkers converge on one correct answer. But the top of that pyramid is your higher level of learning. That's where learners are going to diverge to create their own unique answers. So to push students into exercising higher level of thinking, you need to write your discussion questions that pull from the top of that pyramid. So you're going to choose questions that are going to inspire discussion. And closed-ended questions are not going to inspire discussion. So you need to craft open-ended questions that don't have a right or wrong answer. On that resource that we provided to you from the Center for Teaching and Learning at the University of Texas at Austin, there is a writing good discussion questions guide that they developed. And I like this because this shows some question types that are going to stimulate different kinds of thinking. So they list 3 different question types: convergent thinking, divergent, and evaluative thinking. And then explain that for whatever type it is, that question usually begins with, and then you see some examples of questions for each of those types. And as I said, this is available on that resource source page if you're interested. This is another resource from Johns Hopkins Whitting School of Engineering that has some suggestions for effective online discussions. And the first suggestion here is have a model for the ideal discussion post. And so if you have an example, perhaps from a student from a previous term, maybe you can provide that to your students so that they know more about what you're looking for in terms of what would be an ideal discussion post. The second one is about interactivity by requiring variation in the students' responses. And I like this third bulleted one here, the 3C plus Q method, because each post and response has to include a compliment, a comment, a connection, and then it also has to include a question. When I took that Creative Commons certificate course, I really enjoyed the discussions in that online course because they had the discussion forums were set up similar to this 3C plus Q method. And so you always had to end your post with a question. And to me, that seemed to keep the conversation going. So I personally appreciated that format. And then third, provide opportunities for student autonomy. So give the students opportunities to moderate the discussion. They select the week in which they would like to moderate that discussion. And then the instructor, of course, would be facilitating and providing guidance as they work through that. 4, create smaller group discussions. And so you're going to group the students into subsections and then create a separate but parallel discussion forum for each subsection. And then the last one, assign students rotating roles and responsibilities within the groups. And I really like this synthesizer role because this summarizes the main points and addresses any misconceptions to provide clarity and highlight concepts that might have been overlooked. If you're not assigning a student the role of synthesizer, then you may want to do this yourself as the discussion is ending. Then you provide a summary that would provide the students with that type of information. In a workshop on breaking the humdrum of post once and reply to, Lisa Kidder and Mark Cooper of Idaho State University developed this resource, which has some examples of some alternative discussion structures. And you see they have a number of alternative structures that you can look at. And all of the structures follow this format where this one here is for in the news, and you'll get the overview, the rationale. They tell you when they feel this would work well, and then the connections to quality matters standards and the universal design for learning standards. You'll see instructions for learners and faculty, and then they'll even end it with an example of what a discussion thread might look like for that particular alternative structure. The link to this particular resource is also on our resource page. And from the Brightspace community, a community member shared this example of a discussion forum that she found to be helpful. And with this, the instructions were that they had to read there were 2 required readings, and then they had to find and read one additional article that they chose. Then in their post, they needed to discuss takeaways, themes, questions, apprehensions, and they needed to have their initial post done by Wednesday and then continue the conversation with the peers through Sunday. So this was done every week. And the grading model was at the end of the course that instructor would select 2 to 3 weeks at random and would evaluate the quality and quantity of their participation. So basically, because the students had no idea which 2 or 3 weeks were going to be evaluated, they needed to really participate throughout the semester. One of the things that is also helpful with the discussion forum is that you need to make sure that the students understand what you're expecting, and a rubric is useful for that. And so this is a discussion forum rubric from ACUE, the Association of College and University Educators. And it's a general rubric for discussion forums. And notice here, it's grading based on timely and active participation, thoughtful and complete responses to questions, and thoughtful contributions to the learning community. A link to this resource is also available on that page. And so with rubrics, if you're not familiar with using the Brightspace rubrics tool, I think you should become familiar with it. So what I did was took that rubric from ACUE and actually recreated it inside of Brightspace. And so if you attached a rubric to your discussion, you could simplify the grading, because this is just a click and score for that discussion. And you can also, with the rubric, you can also include feedback, like overall feedback or individual feedback for these items. And in Brightspace, to get to the discussions tool, it is on the toolbar. Before I turn this over to Mark, I just want to mention the hierarchy for discussions in Brightspace is that you have a forum. Then within the forum, you have a topic. Within the topic, you have a thread. And within the thread, you can have replies. When you're creating a discussion forum, you have to have a forum and a topic. So these two are required. All right, and I'm going to turn it over to Mark, and he's going to show you, let me stop my sharing. He's going to show you how he uses discussions in his course. Mark?
Yep. Whoop, wrong one. Where am I?
Let's take a look at a couple of my discussion boards. The first one will be an introductory post. I use this for my online classes or hybrid classes. I give them an example of how to introduce themselves. It's a fairly lengthy post. This is the most recent where I highlight my security detail. I also use the Q&A Cafe, which is a forum for students if they have questions about the course. This is really helpful for my students. Here is an example of a discussion board where they must first read an article from a book, and then I ask specific questions for their post. Notice it says, please explain how this relates to Buddhist views, the term pave the planet or wear shoes, and how each of these options would impact the environment and the persons making the choices. And I tell them to make sure that they include quotes from the article when necessary. And the post should be about 500 words. Now, in order to get meaningful dialogue between the students, I structure the replies fairly detailed. So let's take a look. In their two posts to other students, they need to use each of these methods. One I call the CPR method because it's easier for me to remember. They need to reply with a constructive comment that's encouraging, and this comment will help the person expand this discussion post into a 2-page single-spaced essay later on. I use a lot of scaffolding in order to get better quality papers, and so that the students think deeply about each aspect of the paper. So the next is to provide a positive comment on how this post helps the class understand the overall discussion and provides insight into that article and the author's point. And then finally, the student is to provide some recommendations how the student can either clarify the point, expand the point, or suggest additional points to address so that their paper will be complete. The second method is for a post that's not quite there, that might be a little off. So in order to reply, they need to use the COD method: critique, offer suggestions, and direct. Now, I urge them to offer gentle advice as to how the student's argument might be a little off base, and then offer suggestions that might help the student. It might point them to a quote in the article or areas in the article that could help the student get back on track. Finally, they can direct them to other students' posts for clarification. If they've seen a particularly good post that was very helpful, they can always direct this student to that helpful post. And I encourage them to always end this step with a positive and encouraging remark so that they can help their students do better work in the future. Let's take a look at the rubric that I have for this particular post. Please note that I have descriptive elements in each of the levels that I use. I used some for my last semester and I wasn't really happy with them, so I just deleted them, and I'm going to think about them again and make them a little clearer and a little bit more applicable and easy to understand for the next time I teach it. So the first is just simply, did they provide a 500-word post? Next, we'll look at the grammar and spelling, and if they answered the question completely. Now, this question had 3 particular questions, so that's important that they answer each of them completely and directly. And then just looking at their reply to post 1 and reply to post 2, see how well they followed the idea or the pattern that I've suggested. And you add these up and it adds to 20. So if there are any questions, please contact me. Thanks a lot.
Hey Janice, while Mark was presenting, it came up in the chat about his word count requirement, and we have the question is, does Brightspace show you the word count?
Yes, it absolutely does.
So maybe before we're done, show how that's done.
Correct.
Thank you.
So actually in the Brightspace editor, so this is I'm in my Sandbox course, and this is an Introduce Yourself forum with an Introduce Yourself topic. So if the student were introducing themselves and click on this link and then start a thread.
Oh, does the camera, Elizabeth, is the camera? Oh yeah, it's showing. Okay, I'm sorry.
As you are typing, notice the word count here in the Brightspace editor. So they will be able to see the word count as they're making their posting. The Brightspace editor will take care of that. I'm going to go ahead and cancel this. And then I'm going to quickly go back to this discussion list, because I remember I said you have to have a forum and a topic. So here, this is my forum. It's called Introductions, and I have no information in the description, but in the topic itself is where the details or the information that the students would need appears. Whereas this particular discussion forum has the instructions and the information in the description of the forum, because this is consistent for each of the topics. And the way this is set up is that there's a current events discussion each week. And so the instructions for each week is the same. And so I'm including the instructions here in the forum where I can have that consistent in one place, and set the option so that when the student goes into the topic, they can actually see this forum description each time. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you. All right. So I'm going to go back to this presentation, and I have some additional information for you. Sometime within the last, I want to say at least the last year, the @mentions tag was introduced. Every month we get a continuous delivery update. And so @mentions was one thing that was introduced. And with this, you can actually tag other users within that course. And so you can encourage the students to tag each other as well. When you're tagged, you're notified with an alert telling you that you were tagged. On the cat food blog, and if you drop a link to the cat food blog in the chat for me, there is a blog post that talks about this. Brightspace tip number 297 with some examples of how you might be able to take advantage of @mentions in your discussions.
Can I break in real quick here?
Yes.
Janice showed me this last week, and I used it right away because I had a student who did a really good post. So my reply to her tagged her. So that way, and you can also pin that post. So I pinned her post so that it would always show up at the top when people are going through those. So those are really, really helpful for me.
Thank you, Mark.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And then on your discussions, you can apply restrictions. So you can lock the discussion topics, which basically is going to close the conversation, but allow the students or users to refer back to posts. You can hide the discussion forums and topics so they are not displayed at all. And you can restrict access for groups and sections, but we actually don't use sections here at Xavier, but you can restrict access for groups so only those members of the groups can access that. Your forum and topic options, or allow anonymous posts. So if you want the students to post, but you want them to be able to do it anonymous, choose whether they want to do it anonymously or not. You can check that box. There's an option where users can start a thread before they can read and reply to others. And so you may want them to post something first before they can start seeing what others have said. And then the option for moderation, where you as the instructor would be able to approve individual posts before they are displayed. Your other, some other thread options, you can mark all posts as being read or unread. So that might improve your workflow. You can flag threads. So this would help you to return to a post at a later time, or you can might want to monitor replies to threads. Mark was just talking about the pinning of a thread. And so you can up the visibility of an important thread. So you can pin that thread so it always comes to the top. And then there's a copy thread option. So you can create new threads using the copy.
Quick question to both of you. If you pin a thread, does the student know you pinned it? Or they just see it at the top and they don't know it's like is it indicated as pinned, or is it just at the top and looks organic?
They will see it at the top, but there's also like a little push pin. Okay. So if they're paying attention, if they're paying attention, they would see that it's pinned.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. And you can also set up ratings for posts. So this allows learners to quickly give feedback about somebody else's response. And the rating systems are 5-star, up vote, down vote, or up vote only. The default is no ratings. Did somebody say something? I didn't hear.
Well, we're just saying that's kind of harsh.
Yeah.
Thumbs down
Right.
on your post.
Right. However, we look at the details of this. Upvote only is similar to liking a post.
Yeah.
If you look at upvote, downvote, that they can indicate if the post is helpful or not. And then the stars, they can indicate how useful a post is. So if you choose the upvote or upvote only or the upvote, downvote, then they would see this, something like this, where they click the plus or the minus, and then ratings, you would see the stars. When you're creating your discussion forums and topics, you indicate whether or not you want to assess the topic as a whole, or you want to assess individual posts in the topic. If you want to assess individual posts, you're going to be checking this box that says allow assessment of individual posts. When you do that, you have to indicate a calculation method. Most of these are pretty self-explanatory, but the two that might not be would be the mode post score, highest on multiple, and then the lowest on multiple. So basically, for example, if you had 2 posts with the score of 7, 3 posts with the score of 8, and another 3 posts with the score of 9, for highest on multiple, you'd be looking at the frequency of 3, and the highest would be 9, so the score would be 9. Likewise, lowest on multiple, if you had that same example, 2 posts with the score of 7, 3 posts with the score of 8, and another 3 posts with the score of 9, lowest on multiple, then the score for that would be the 8 for a frequency of 3. When you're ready to assess your discussions, you can find either the assess topic or you can assess the student in the menu. And then the discussion evaluation was changed recently, so it's similar to the experience is similar to the experience you have when you are grading or looking at an assignment. So over on the right-hand side, if you've attached a rubric, you would see that on the right-hand side, you can grade with the rubric. If you don't have a rubric, you just enter the score here in the box, and then you can include overall feedback. Speaking of feedback, another resource from ACUE is this one, which talks about providing feedback strategically in your online discussions. So, and then some examples. So if you're trying to acknowledge and encourage, then some examples of what you can say. Prompt and confirm. There's also some information here, about how early in the week should you make comments, and how expansive. So I would suggest you check out this resource from ACUE on that. And then in our workshops, we've also talked about this idea of wrappers. And so with discussions, you can apply a wrapper to it as well, where the student it's a self-reflection activity for the students, so that they can evaluate their participation in the online discussion. And also from ACUE is this self-reflection guide for online discussions, where the students would honestly answer some questions and then come up with their score. And notice step number 3 says, what is one thing you plan to do differently the next time to enhance your learning from the discussion board participation? So you could apply this wrapper to the discussion. Are there any? Yes.
A quick question from the chat.
Yes.
Is there any auto grading features on Brightspace? Like, can it auto grade discussions via rubric, or can it auto grade based on the number of words? Are there any auto grading features on Brightspace?
No, not for no.
Yeah, I didn't think so.
Sure.
I didn't think so.
Yeah. All right. Any other questions? All right. We started this workshop when I talked about the second principle of good pedagogical practice develops reciprocity and cooperation among students. And so the Center for Research on Learning and Teaching, the University of Michigan, had some implementation ideas around this particular principle. And some of these are specific to discussions, like ask students to give constructive feedback on each other's work and explain difficult ideas to each other, use small group discussions, and encourage students to work together. Likewise, for principle number 3, encourages active learning, some implementation ideas for this related to this topic. Give students concrete real life situations to analyze, summarize similarities and differences among research findings, and so on. So some implementation ideas around this particular principle as well. I do have some tips for you. And our online discussion tip number 1, create questions that are going to appeal to the students' higher reasoning skills and that are going to spur meaningful discussion. Our tip number 2, ask fewer questions, but better ones. So don't just throw a whole bunch of questions out there trying to see which ones will stick. You're going to probably overwhelm the students and will result in less participation and not more. Tip number 3, display the forum's description in addition to the topic description when viewing a topic. So when you are creating your forum, you'll see that there is an option here that says display forum description in topics. So you want to be make sure that you're consistent with your instructions. So if the instructions for your forum applies to all of the topics, then you can just enter your instructions in that forum and tell the system you want those instructions to be displayed in the topic. So you have that option as well. This tip number 4, incorporate multimedia elements into your discussions. Discussions tend to typically be text heavy. And so universal design for learning, if you include multimedia elements of multiple ways, allows students to be able to do this as well. There's a video note feature which makes it easy to record a video and include it. So incorporate multimedia elements into your discussions. Tip number 5, you can use discussion statistics to get an overview of the student engagement and participation. So when you go to the discussions tool, you'll see there's a statistics tab. And on the statistics tab is where you can get an overview of what's going on with your discussions.
Hey, will you back up one, Janice? I'm sorry, back up to that. I just want to add, when I'm grading discussion posts, I'll often go here first because they have to do one and reply to, right? So I go there first and just scan. And then that way then I can just go to it and just read. And I only have to, if it's inadequate or something like that, then I have to slow down and enter a different grade. But I scan here and say, okay, everybody's got this except for these 3 people, and then I read. And it speeds me up to do it that way.
Great.
You're not making a decision every single time on the grade. Yep.
Great, thank you for sharing that. Tip number 6, as we talked about, pin the discussion threads to keep it at the top of the list. So important threads, you can pin it and it will appear at the top of the list. Tip number 7, consider locking a discussion topic to end the conversation, then using a pinned summary post inside the topic. So that summary would be at the top. When users access that topic, they'll see that. And then going back to my including multimedia, use a video note to record your summary post. And if you do that, make sure that you click the box that says generate automatic captions for accessibility purposes. Tip number 8, everybody has the option to change your discussion settings. So when you go to the discussions tab, you'll see on the right-hand side of the page a settings link. So you can go there and set your preferences. Tip number 9, users can change their notification settings as well. So in your personal menu under notifications, there are a couple of options related to discussion items. And so if you encourage the students to go to the notifications, they can specify how they want to receive updates about discussion items. We've got some potential pitfalls. Remember, I said a forum must have at least one topic because that is important. When you're creating a forum, you will see right underneath the title of your forum, there's a checkbox that says create a new topic in this forum with the same title. So if your topics don't need to have different titles, you can just check that box to simplify, and the system will create a topic with the exact same title as your forum, and you can take care of that in one step.
And Janice, while you're going through this, I'm just letting you know a few people are having to leave because they've got 1:15 classes. Thanks for coming, everybody.
Yes,
We will
thank
send
you for
everybody
coming.
the evaluation link.
Yes, thank you. Pitfall number 2, ensure your discussion forums and topics are not unintentionally hidden. So when you're creating those, you'll see on your restrictions tab, you have the option of setting your availability. So make sure that you're not unintentionally hiding a forum or topic. And then also check your date restrictions. So make sure that they are what you want. And then also you have these options for when the forum or topic will be visible to the student. So make sure you select what you want, and these question marks will provide you with some additional information as to what that particular option is. And then when you're using group discussions, make sure you set the appropriate group restrictions, and you will find that also on the restrictions tab. And then as we wrap up, I'm just curious, do you see value in utilizing the online discussions for student engagement?
Yep.
All right. Thank you. I do want to point out that interactive rubrics is a module that is in the Learn Everywhere Zula course. So if you have not taken a look at that or want more information about how to use interactive rubrics, you can find that in the Lex course. And then information about video notes, there's a cat food blog post on the cat food blog that would assist you with that. Remember the workshop slides, the recording as soon as it's ready, and the resources are on our wiki. And I want to point out that our next Lex Advanced workshop is going to be on facilitating group work in your Brightspace course. Mark your calendars. That is Thursday, October 27th at 12:15. You can scan this QR code to go to our events page, or you can go to that URL. Any questions as we wrap up and I provide you with the QR code for our workshop evaluation? So if you're still in the room, because the only person I see is Mark at the podium.
No, Mark is still here.
Okay. So yeah, fill out the workshop evaluation either by scanning this code, or you can go to the URL. And if you're still online.
I just dropped it.
Okay, thank you. And your participation in today's workshop will earn you the online discussions badge. You will see that in the Learn Everywhere Zula course. And just because I can, congratulations.
Thank you, Janice.
All right, I'm going to, do we have any questions? I'm going to stop my sharing.